Now, researchers believe they've discovered the origins of the Black Death more than 600 years after it killed tens of millions in Europe, Asia and North Africa. Despite years of research, scientists had been unable to pinpoint where the bubonic plague began. Now, analysis suggests it was in Kyrgyzstan, in Central Asia, in the 1330s, as researchers chose the area after noting a significant spike in burials there in 1338 and 1339. Well, joining us from Oslo is Philip Slavin, Associate Professor at University of Stirling, who's one of the senior authors of the study. Thanks for joining us to talk about what you found. I'm really curious about how you decided that that was the origin in Kyrgyzstan.
Right. So, the topic of the origins of the Black Death has been one of the most hotly debated controversies in the history of plague and perhaps in the history in general. So there are several theories related to the origins of the Black Death. Some people thought it started in China. Another prevailing theory held that it started somewhere in Central Asia. Then some other historians held it started somewhere in the Black Sea region, perhaps Mongolia, perhaps India. And a few years ago, actually, I came across a very interesting publication of tombstones from one Central Asian Christian cemetery in northern Kyrgyzstan. And what's really wonderful is that those tombstones are precisely dated. And if you look on this entire corpus of those tombstones, there are 467 dated tombstones running between 1248 and 1345. There are 2 years when you have a massive spike, as you noted, in the number of annual burials, and about 25. So it's about 25% of 467 burials are dated to those 2 years. So I thought, wow, that sounds really intriguing. So it was 7 years before the Black Death came to Europe, and I thought, well, is there any way actually to connect this type of evidence with the outbreaks of plague in Europe? And obviously, what's another interesting thing to note here is that most of the tombstones are quite laconic and quite short, but there are 10 tombstones that state specifically that those victims have died of pestilence. And it was written in Syriac language, and the Syriac term for pestilence is mautana. Obviously, without ancient DNA, I couldn't really go anywhere beyond the hypothetical framework. So that's why I decided to join forces with my colleagues in microbiology at the Max Planck Institute and the University of Tübingen.
And so it was a sort of an extrapolation from there. I'm sorry to jump in, but I do want to ask, obviously pandemics have a particular relevance to us now. Just how did this plague change the people and the culture at the time?
So obviously there's so many layers of change. So obviously the most immediate change was that you lost about at least half of the population in Western Eurasia, and in the Middle East and North Africa. You also have an uncountable number of people who died in Central Asia. We don't know how many people. Now, the changes would really vary from place to place. One of the most significant changes for Central Asia, for example, was the deurbanization. So lots of towns just tended to disappear in the second half of the 14th century. It may well be connected to this outbreak. In Europe, actually, the long-term influence of the Black Death was rather more positive than negative. For example, the living standards of peasants in England and parts of France and in Germany actually improved.
It's certainly very interesting that you say there were some positive effects. I'm afraid that's all we have time for, but thank you very much, Philip Slavin, for joining us.